The mud-caked boots stumbled through the ranch gate at dawn, designer leather ruined beyond recognition. Victoria Pemberton, daughter of the wealthiest banker in 3 counties, had nothing left but the torn silk dress on her back and a determination that surprised even herself. The cowboy watching from the porch took one look at her manicured hands and said the words that would change everything. "Stay, if you can work like them." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 24 hours earlier, Victoria had discovered her father's ledgers hidden in his study. The numbers told a story of foreclosures that destroyed families, of interest rates that crushed dreams, of a man who built his fortune on the broken backs of honest folk. The confrontation that followed shattered every illusion she'd held about the man who raised her. "You're no daughter of mine if you can't understand business," Charles Pemberton had said, his face cold as winter stone. "These people made their choices. I simply collected what was owed." But Victoria had seen the names in those ledgers. The Hendersons who lost their farm after Mr. Henderson broke his leg. The widow Garrett who couldn't keep up payments after her husband died in a mining accident. Good people whose only crime was believing her father might show mercy. She'd packed nothing when she fled in the night, knowing her father would freeze her accounts by morning. The October wind cut through her evening dress as she walked, then ran, then stumbled along the dark road, leading away from Silver Ridge. By the time the sun painted the horizon pink, her feet bled through her ruined shoes, and exhaustion threatened to drop her where she stood. The Cross Creek Ranch appeared like a mirage in the early light. Not the grandest spread in the valley, but the wooden buildings stood solid and welcoming against the backdrop of golden aspens. Smoke curled from the main house chimney, promising warmth she desperately needed. Victoria's legs gave out just as she reached the gate. She sank to her knees in the dusty road, pride warring with desperation. All her life, doors had opened before she reached them. Now she knelt in the dirt, unsure if she even had the strength to knock. "You running from something or toward it?" The voice came from above, deep and measured. Victoria looked up to find a man silhouetted against the morning sun. Even in her exhausted state, she noticed the quiet strength in his stance, the way he held himself like someone who'd earned every callus on his hands. "Both," she managed, her throat dry as sand. "Neither. I don't know anymore." The cowboy studied her with eyes the color of storm clouds. Marcus Sullivan had seen plenty of lost souls drift through the valley, but none wearing silk and pearls. He descended the porch steps slowly, his boots raising small clouds of dust. "Can you stand?" Victoria tried, but her legs trembled like a newborn colt's. Without hesitation, Marcus offered his hand. His palm was rough, scarred from years of rope work, but his grip was steady and sure. "Thank you," she whispered as he helped her to the porch. "Don't thank me yet," Marcus replied. "You'll need to earn your keep if you're staying." Victoria almost laughed. Earn her keep? She'd never earned anything in her life. Everything had been given, arranged, prepared for her. But the alternative was returning to her father's house, to a life built on others' misery. "I can learn," she said, meeting his gaze with more confidence than she felt. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Learning's different from doing this. This is a working ranch. Everyone pulls their weight, or they move on." The screen door creaked open, and a woman emerged carrying a steaming mug. Rosa Sullivan, Marcus's sister-in-law, had the kind of face that suggested she'd weathered her share of storms. Her dark hair was already pinned for a day's work, and her apron bore the stains of countless meals prepared before dawn. "Marcus, stop interrogating the poor thing," Rosa scolded. "Can't you see she's about to collapse?" "Just explaining how things work around here," Marcus replied, but he stepped aside. Rosa pressed the mug into Victoria's trembling hands. The coffee was strong enough to strip paint. Nothing like the delicate brew she was accustomed to, but it was the best thing she'd ever tasted. "What's your name, honey?" Rosa asked gently. Victoria hesitated. Her name meant something in these parts. Pemberton was stamped on half the foreclosure notices in the valley. "Victoria," she said finally, omitting her surname. "Well, Victoria, you look like you've had quite a night." Rosa's eyes took in the torn dress, the muddy shoes, the general air of someone who'd made a desperate choice. Come inside. We'll sort out the questions after you've had something to eat. The kitchen was nothing like the marble and copper showpiece in her father's house. Cast iron pans hung from hooks above a massive wood-burning stove. The table bore scars from years of use, and mismatched chairs surrounded it like old friends gathering for gossip. 3 ranch hands sat nursing their coffee, conversation dying as Victoria entered. She recognized the look in their eyes, curiosity mixed with skepticism. What was someone like her doing in a place like this? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Boys, this is Victoria," Rosa announced. "She'll be staying for a bit." The oldest of the 3, a grizzled man named Frank, snorted. "Another mouth to feed with winter coming on?" "Frank," Rosa's voice carried a warning. "Just saying what everyone's thinking," Frank muttered into his mug. "Times are hard enough without taking in strays." Victoria's cheeks burned, but she kept her eyes on the coffee mug. He wasn't wrong. She was a stray, and worse, a useless one. What did she know about ranch work? Her hands had held nothing heavier than a tea service. Marcus entered and pulled out a chair, the scrape of wood on wood commanding attention. "Miss Victoria here says she can learn. I'm inclined to give her the chance." "She doesn't look like she could lift a feed bucket," protested the youngest hand, a boy barely out of his teens named Jimmy. "Didn't ask what she looks like," Marcus replied evenly. "Asked if she could work." Rosa set a plate in front of Victoria. Eggs, bacon, biscuits with gravy. Simple food that seemed impossibly generous given her circumstances. Her stomach cramped with hunger, but she forced herself to eat slowly, aware of every eye in the room watching her. "Where'd you come from?" asked the 3rd ranch hand, Diego, his accent carrying hints of somewhere far south of Montana. Victoria swallowed carefully. "Silver Ridge." The room went still. Everyone knew Silver Ridge meant money, meant the Pemberton Bank, meant trouble for folks like them. "What's a Silver Ridge girl doing out here with nothing but the clothes on her back?" Frank's question carried an edge sharp as a skinning knife. Victoria met his stare. She could lie, make up some story about bandits or accidents. But these people were offering her shelter when she had nothing to offer in return. They deserved at least a piece of the truth. "I left because I couldn't stay," she said simply. "Because I learned something about my family that made staying impossible." Rosa and Marcus exchanged glances. Family troubles, they understood. The ranch itself was a testament to that. Marcus had inherited it after his brother died 2 years back, leaving Rosa and her young son behind. They'd pooled their grief and resources, creating a new kind of family bound by work and necessity rather than blood. "Well," Rosa said, breaking the silence, "whatever brought you here, you're welcome to stay until you figure out your next step." "She stays, she works," Marcus reminded them all. "Same as everyone else." Victoria straightened in her chair. "What kind of work?" Jimmy laughed, not unkindly. "Every kind. Feeding, mucking stalls, mending fence, moving cattle. Whatever needs doing." "I don't know how to do any of that," Victoria admitted. "Then you'll learn," Marcus said. He pushed back from the table and stood. "Starting now. Rosa, you got some work clothes that might fit her?" Rosa looked Victoria up and down. "Lucy's things might work. She was about your size." Victoria didn't ask who Lucy was or why her clothes were available. The past haunted everyone in this kitchen in different ways. An hour later, Victoria stood in the barn wearing borrowed canvas pants, a flannel shirt, and boots that pinched her feet. The silk dress lay folded in the room Rosa had given her, a reminder of a life that already seemed like someone else's dream. Marcus handed her a pitchfork. "Ever muck out a stall?" Victoria shook her head. "Then it's time you learned." He led her to a stall where a bay mare stood placidly. "This is Buttercup," sweet as her name suggests, so she's a good place to start. The smell hit Victoria first. Horse and hay and something earthier she didn't want to identify. Her stomach turned, but she gripped the pitchfork tighter. "Watch," Marcus demonstrated, his movements efficient and practiced. "You're not just throwing it around. There's a rhythm to it. Fork, lift, turn, dump. Save the clean bedding when you can. Waste not, want not." Victoria tried to copy his movements. The pitchfork was heavier than it looked, and the soiled bedding seemed to have a mind of its own. Her first attempt sent dirty straw scattering, some landing on her boots. Jimmy, passing by with a water bucket, chuckled. "City girl's gonna need more practice than that." Heat flooded Victoria's cheeks, but she set her jaw and tried again. Fork, lift, turn, dump. Her arms ached already, and she'd barely made a dent in the stall. Marcus watched without comment for several minutes. "You're fighting it," he said finally. "Don't muscle through. Use the tool. Don't fight against it." He stepped behind her, adjusting her grip on the handle. His hands covered hers for a moment, showing her how to use leverage instead of brute strength. Victoria was acutely aware of his proximity, the steadiness of his breathing, the patience in his instruction. "Better," he said, stepping back. "Now do it about 1,000 more times and you'll have it down." He wasn't joking. The barn held 12 stalls and each needed daily cleaning. By the time Victoria finished the first one, her hands bore the beginning of blisters, and sweat soaked through the borrowed shirt. "5 more minutes, and I'd have won the bet," Frank commented from the barn door. Victoria paused, leaning on the pitchfork. "What bet?" "How long you'd last," Diego explained, not unkindly. "Frank said you'd quit before finishing 1 stall. I gave you 2. "And Jimmy?" Victoria asked, surprised to find herself curious rather than offended. "Jimmy didn't bet," Marcus cut in. "He's got more sense than these 2 old buzzards." Victoria straightened, her back screaming in protest. "What about you? How long did you give me?" Marcus studied her, those storm cloud eyes unreadable. "Didn't bet on when you'd quit. Bet on whether you'd surprise us all." He walked away before she could ask which way he'd wagered. The morning stretched into afternoon. Victoria moved from mucking stalls to hauling water, from hauling water to stacking feed sacks. Each task introduced new muscles to the concept of pain. Her soft hands split and bled. Her legs trembled with exhaustion. But she didn't stop. Rosa appeared periodically, ostensibly checking on the chickens or gathering eggs, but Victoria caught her watching with an expression that might have been approval. "You're doing fine," Rosa said during one pass. "First day's always the hardest." Victoria wanted to ask how many first days it took before your body stopped feeling like it had been trampled by the very horses you were tending, but she just nodded and went back to work. As the sun reached its zenith, Marcus called a break for lunch. The hands gathered in the shade of a large oak tree, passing around sandwiches and cold water. Victoria collapsed more than sat, every fiber of her being crying for rest. "Not bad for a Silver Ridge princess," Frank admitted grudgingly. "Thought for sure you'd be crying for your daddy by now." Victoria's stomach clenched. "I'm not a princess," she said quietly, "and I'm never going back." "Everyone goes back eventually," Diego said, "when the work gets too hard or the winter gets too cold. Seen it plenty of times." "Not everyone," Marcus corrected. His gaze found Victoria's. "Some people find out they're stronger than they knew." Jimmy offered Victoria his canteen. "Ma'am, no disrespect, but why would someone like you want to stay here? You could be sitting pretty in some fancy house, never lifting anything heavier than a teacup." Victoria accepted the water gratefully, buying time to form an answer. How could she explain that the fancy house was built on broken dreams? That every comfort she'd enjoyed came at the cost of families like theirs? "Because," she said finally, "I'd rather earn calluses honestly than wear silk bought with blood money." The words hung in the air like dust motes in sunlight. Frank's expression shifted, something like recognition flickering in his weathered features. "Pemberton," he said. It wasn't a question. Victoria didn't deny it. His daughter. Former daughter, I suppose. He made that clear when I left. The silence that followed felt heavy as a wet saddle blanket. These men knew the Pemberton name. Knew it from foreclosure notices and impossible interest rates. From friends and neighbors who'd lost everything to her father's greed. "Well, I'll be damned," Diego muttered. Jimmy looked like someone had slapped him with a cold fish. You're the banker's daughter? The one who had that big party last month where they served champagne from France? Guilty, Victoria said, the word tasting like ash. Frank stood abruptly. I lost my place 3 years back. Pemberton Bank called in the loan early when I couldn't make one payment. One payment after 20 years of never missing. Victoria met his angry gaze. I'm sorry. I didn't know. Not until yesterday. Sorry doesn't get my land back, Frank spat. No, Victoria agreed. It doesn't. Nothing I can do will undo what he's done. But I'm not him. I'm not asking you to forgive or forget. I'm just asking for the chance to prove I'm not my father. By playing at being poor? Frank's voice dripped contempt. By pretending you know what it's like to have nothing? I'm not pretending, Victoria said quietly. I left with nothing. I can't go back. This isn't a game to me. It's the only choice I have left if I want to look at myself in the mirror. Marcus had remained silent through the exchange, but now he stood. Frank, you got every right to your anger. But she's here, working like everyone else. Judge her on what she does, not where she came from. Easy for you to say, Frank shot back. You didn't lose everything. Didn't I? Marcus's voice carried a warning. We've all lost things, Frank. Question is what we do after. Rosa appeared at the edge of their gathering, her young son Charlie beside her. The boy, maybe 6 years old, regarded Victoria with the uncomplicated curiosity of childhood. Mama says you're learning to work, Charlie announced. I can show you how to feed the chickens. I'm real good at it. The tension cracked like ice in spring. Even Frank's scowl softened at the boy's earnest offer. I'd appreciate that, Charlie, Victoria said. I've never fed chickens before. Never? Charlie's eyes went wide. But how did you get eggs? Someone else fed them for me, Victoria admitted. Charlie pondered this. That seems silly. Feeding chickens is fun. They make funny noises, and sometimes they chase Jimmy. That was one time, Jimmy protested. But he was fighting a smile. The afternoon work resumed with a different energy. Frank maintained his distance, but the active hostility had faded to watchful wariness. Diego offered occasional pointers on technique. Jimmy shared his water more freely, but it was Marcus who occupied Victoria's thoughts as she worked. He said little, but she felt his presence constantly. When she struggled with a particularly heavy feed sack, he appeared to take the other end without being asked. When her blistered hands fumbled with a gate latch, he showed her a better grip. Why are you helping me? She asked during one such moment. Marcus considered the question. Everyone deserves a second chance. Even bankers' daughters. Is that what this is? A second chance? That's up to you, he replied. Chances are just opportunities. What you do with them determines what they become. As the sun began its descent toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, Victoria found herself standing in the barn door, looking out at the ranch. Her body ached in ways she hadn't known possible. Her hands were raw. Her feet felt like they'd been beaten with hammers. But she was still standing. Quitting time, Marcus announced, appearing beside her. You made it through day one. Barely, Victoria admitted. Barely counts, he said. A ghost of a smile played at his lips. Same time tomorrow? Victoria looked down at her blistered hands, then back at the man who'd given her a chance when he had every reason not to. Same time tomorrow. As she limped toward the house for supper, Victoria realized she'd crossed more than physical distance in her flight from Silver Ridge. She'd crossed from one life to another, from one version of herself to a person she was only beginning to discover. The banker's daughter was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone who might, just might, deserve to stay. The first snow came early that year, dusting the ranch like flour on a baker's table. Victoria stood in the pre-dawn darkness, her breath forming clouds as she headed to the barn. 6 weeks had passed since she'd stumbled through the gate, and her body had transformed. Soft hands now bore calluses thick as leather. Arms that once struggled with a pitchfork now hefted feed sacks with practiced ease. But some changes ran deeper than muscle and sinew. "Morning," Marcus greeted her from Buttercup's stall, already halfway through the morning feeding. "Morning," Victoria replied, grabbing her own pitchfork without being told. They'd developed a rhythm, she and Marcus, working in comfortable silence as the ranch woke around them. "Storm's coming," he observed, nodding toward the mountains where clouds gathered like an army preparing for battle. Victoria had learned to read the sky these past weeks, to see weather in the way birds flew and horses stood. "Big one?" "Big enough. We'll need to move the cattle down from the upper pasture before it hits." Moving cattle. 6 weeks ago, the phrase would have meant nothing to her. Now she understood the urgency. Cattle caught in a high pasture during a blizzard could be lost, and the ranch couldn't afford to lose even one head. Frank appeared in the barn door, his face grim. "Just got word from town. Pemberton Bank is calling in the Garrett Ranch loan today. Widow Garrett's got till noon to pay in full or they're seizing everything." Victoria's pitchfork stilled, the widow Garrett whose name she'd seen in her father's ledgers. A woman struggling to keep her small ranch afloat after her husband's death. "How much?" Marcus asked. $800, Frank replied. "Might as well be 8,000 for all she's got." Victoria's mind raced. $800. Once, she'd spent more than that on a single dress. Now it might as well be a fortune. She'd sent word to her friend Mary in Silver Ridge, hoping to access some of her personal items to sell, but her father had anticipated that move. Everything she'd owned was now locked away, inaccessible as the moon. "Can't we help?" she asked. Frank's laugh was bitter. "With what? We're barely keeping our own heads above water." It was true. Victoria had learned the ranch's precarious finances through overheard conversations and worried looks. They were making it, but just barely. One bad season, one disaster, and they'd be in the same position as the widow Garrett. Marcus set his jaw. "We'll figure something out. Always do." But as the morning wore on, no solution presented itself. Victoria worked with unusual fervor, as if she could somehow sweat out an answer to the widow's predicament. The approaching storm seemed to mock their efforts, growing darker and more ominous with each passing hour. "You're awful quiet," Rosa observed when Victoria came in for the midday meal. "Something on your mind?" Victoria hesitated. She'd grown close to Rosa these past weeks, finding in her a sister she'd never had. But how could she explain the guilt that gnawed at her? That her father was the storm destroying lives while she played at being a ranch hand? "The widow Garrett," Victoria said finally. "I keep thinking there must be something we can do." Rosa's expression softened. "You can't save everyone, honey. Lord knows we'd all like to, but sometimes the world's too big and we're too small." "But we have to try," Victoria insisted. "Don't we?" Charlie, perched on his usual stool, piped up. "Mama says trying is what makes us good people, even when we can't fix everything." Rosa ruffled her son's hair, out of the mouths of babes. But Victoria couldn't shake the feeling that trying wasn't enough. Not when she knew intimately how her father operated. He wouldn't just take the Garrett ranch. He'd sell it to the highest bidder, probably to amalgamate with other seized properties. Another family scattered, another piece of the community lost. The solution came to her as she was helping Marcus prepare for the cattle drive. They were in the tack room, checking ropes and saddles, when she noticed an old saddle in the corner, covered in dust but beautifully made. "Whose was that?" she asked. Marcus followed her gaze, his expression tightening. "My brother's. Competition saddle. He won it at the state rodeo 5 years running. It must be valuable. Priceless," Marcus corrected. "To me, anyway." Victoria understood. She'd left behind jewelry worth thousands, but the only thing she truly missed was her mother's simple gold locket. Value wasn't always measured in dollars. "What if," she began carefully, "we could raise the money for Widow Garrett? Not charity, but an investment, She pays us back when she can." "With what money?" Marcus asked patiently. "You've seen our books." Victoria had, during the evenings when she helped Rosa with the ledgers. Every penny was accounted for, every expense justified. But she'd also noticed something else. "The fall gathering is coming up," she said. "Other ranches will need extra hands. What if we hired ourselves out? All of us, working extra shifts. Pool the money." Marcus considered this. "It's possible, but that's weeks away. The widow needs money today. Then we need something to sell. Something valuable enough to raise $800 quickly." She looked again at the competition saddle, then around the tack room. Her eyes landed on Marcus's guitar, propped in the corner. She'd heard him play it in the evenings, simple melodies that spoke of loneliness and longing. "No," Marcus said, reading her thoughts. "We're not selling off pieces of our lives to fix your father's cruelty." The words stung because they were true. This was her father's doing, his cruelty. But that only strengthened her resolve. "Then I'll fix it another way," she declared. Before Marcus could stop her, Victoria was out the door and heading for the house. She burst into her small room and retrieved the one thing of value she'd kept hidden. Not jewelry or money, but something more precious in its way. Her mother's journal. Elizabeth Pemberton had died when Victoria was 12, but she'd left behind this leather-bound book filled with her thoughts, dreams, and most importantly, her recipes. Elizabeth had been famous throughout the valley for her cooking, especially her pies. Women had offered substantial sums for her recipes, but she'd always demurred, saying they were family treasures. Now Victoria held those treasures in her hands. The journal itself might fetch something from a collector, but the real value lay in what those recipes could do. She found Rosa and Marcus in the kitchen, deep in discussion about the approaching storm. "I have an idea," Victoria announced, "but I need help," she explained quickly. They would make her mother's famous pies, as many as they could before the storm hit. Jimmy could ride to neighboring towns, selling them to hotels and restaurants that remembered Elizabeth Pemberton's reputation. It wasn't a fortune, but it might be enough. "You'd sell your mother's recipes?" Rosa asked softly. "I'd share them," Victoria corrected. "My mother believed in community. She'd understand." Marcus studied her. "It's a long shot." "It's a shot," Victoria countered. "That's more than we had 5 minutes ago." What followed was a frenzy of activity that put their usual ranch work to shame. Rosa commanded the kitchen like a general preparing for battle. Victoria mixed and rolled, drawing on memories of watching her mother work. Frank, despite his lingering suspicions, proved surprisingly adept at peeling apples. Even Charlie helped, standing on a chair to sprinkle cinnamon with solemn concentration. Marcus and Jimmy prepared for a fast ride to town, saddling the best horses and mapping out routes to hit the most establishments in the least time. "The Grand Hotel in Silver Ridge," Victoria said as they prepared to leave. "Tell them these are Elizabeth Pemberton's recipes. They'll remember her. They used to beg her to sell to them." Marcus paused at the door. "Your father will hear about this." "Good," Victoria said firmly. "Let him know his daughter is using her mother's memory to fight his greed." The hours that followed blurred together. Pie after pie emerged from the oven, filling the house with scents that drew the ranch hands like bears to honey. Diego fashioned carrying boxes from spare lumber. Frank, his animosity forgotten in the face of shared purpose, helped load the wagon with practiced efficiency. 24 pies, Rosa announced as the last batch cooled. At $30 each if they all sell. $720, Victoria finished. We're still short. Not if we add this, Marcus said quietly. He held out a leather pouch. Prize money from last year's rodeo. Been saving it for ranch emergencies. Figure this qualifies. Victoria's throat tightened. Marcus, I can't. You're not, he corrected. We are. That's what community means. The storm hit just as Marcus and Jimmy disappeared down the road, their horses kicking up dust that mixed with the first fat snowflakes. Those left behind could only wait and pray. Victoria found herself in the barn, too anxious to stay still. She attacked the stalls with nervous energy. mucking and spreading fresh straw as if she could somehow influence the outcome through sheer effort. "You'll wear yourself out," Rosa observed, appearing with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. Victoria accepted the mug gratefully, her hands trembling slightly. "I can't just stand around waiting." "Sometimes that's the hardest work of all," Rosa said, settling onto a hay bale. "Marcus told me what you said about sharing your mother's recipes instead of selling them." "Words matter," Victoria replied. "My mother taught me that. She said recipes were meant to be shared, like stories or songs. They only die when we lock them away." Rosa studied her. "You've changed these past weeks." "Have I?" Victoria considered this. "Or maybe I'm just finally becoming who I was supposed to be. Maybe that's the same thing." They sat in companionable silence, listening to the wind pick up outside. The storm was building faster than expected. Victoria tried not to think about Marcus and Jimmy riding through it, precious cargo in their saddlebags. "Can I ask you something?" Victoria said eventually. "Why did you accept me so easily? Frank had his reasons for suspicion, but you and Marcus, you just opened your door." Rosa's smile was sad and wise. "Because I know what it's like to have your world turned upside down. When my husband died, I thought that was the end. Marcus could have sent us away, sold the ranch, started fresh somewhere else. Instead, he said we were family, and family sticks together." "He's a good man," Victoria said softly. "The best," Rosa agreed. "Though he'd never admit it, thinks he's just doing what anyone would do." "Not anyone," Victoria said, thinking of her father. "Some people take. Some people give. Marcus gives even when it costs him." Rosa's knowing look made Victoria blush. "He's noticed you too, you know. The way you've thrown yourself into this life. The way you treat Charlie like he matters. The way you've never once complained, even when Frank was at his worst." "I've complained plenty," Victoria protested. "Just quietly, to the horses." Rosa laughed. "The horses are good listeners. They've heard my share of complaints too." The barn door burst open, bringing a swirl of snow and a panicked Diego. "They're back. But Jimmy's horse came up lame. They're walking the last mile in this storm." Without hesitation, Victoria grabbed a rope and headed for the door. "We need to go after them." "In this?" Diego gestured at the near whiteout conditions. "You can't see 10 feet. "Then we'd better hurry before it gets worse," Victoria said. She was already out the door before anyone could stop her. The wind hit like a physical blow, driving snow into her face and stealing her breath. But she pressed forward, following the road by instinct more than sight. Rosa and Diego caught up, bringing additional ropes and lanterns. They spread out as much as they dared, calling Marcus and Jimmy's names into the howling wind. It was Charlie who spotted them first, his young eyes catching movement through the snow. There, by the big rock, 2 figures struggled through the drifts, one supporting the other. Marcus had Jimmy's arm over his shoulder, practically carrying the younger man through the snow. "His ankle," Marcus explained as they reached them, "twisted it when we had to abandon the horse." "Did you make it?" Victoria asked, taking Jimmy's other arm. "The widow?" Marcus's grin broke through his exhaustion. "Every pie sold. Some places bought too. And the Grand Hotel? They want standing orders. Weekly deliveries of your mother's apple supreme." Relief flooded through Victoria so powerfully she almost stumbled. They'd done it. Against all odds, they'd raised the money. The banker wasn't happy, Jimmy added through chattering teeth. "You should have seen his face when the widow walked in with full payment." Victoria could imagine it perfectly. Her father hated when his plans were thwarted, especially by people he considered beneath him. They made it back to the ranch house, just as the storm reached its full fury. Huddled around the kitchen table with hot soup and coffee, they counted the money one more time. $840. Enough to save the Garrett Ranch with $40 left over. "We'll return your rodeo money," Victoria told Marcus. "Keep it," he said. "Call it an investment in the future." Their eyes met across the table, and Victoria felt something shift between them. This wasn't employer and hired hand anymore. This was something deeper, forged in shared purpose and mutual respect. Frank cleared his throat. "I owe you an apology," he said to Victoria. "Judged you by your name instead of your character. That was wrong of me." Victoria shook her head. "You had every right to your anger. I'm just grateful you gave me a chance to prove myself." "You've done more than that," Frank said gruffly. "You've shown us that fighting back is possible, that David can still beat Goliath sometimes." "Not alone," Victoria corrected. "David had God. I had all of you." The storm raged for 2 days, trapping them all in the house. But instead of cabin fever, a festival atmosphere prevailed. Rosa taught Victoria more recipes. Marcus showed Charlie how to whittle. Frank regaled them with stories of the old days, when the valley was young and full of promise. On the second night, Victoria found Marcus on the porch, watching the snow fall in the lamplight. "Peaceful," she observed, joining him. "After the chaos, yes," he agreed. "You did good, Victoria. Your mother would be proud." "I hope so." She pulled her shawl tighter. "I've been thinking about what Frank said. About fighting back." Marcus turned to study her. "And?" "My father owns the bank, but he doesn't own the valley. What if we could create an alternative? A cooperative, where ranchers help each other instead of relying on his loans?" "That's a big dream," Marcus said carefully. "I'm learning that big dreams are just small dreams that find the right people," Victoria replied. "We saved one ranch. Why not more?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "You're talking about declaring war on your father." "I'm talking about choosing a side," Victoria corrected. "I chose mine the night I ran. Now I want to fight for it. It won't be easy. He has power, influence, money." "We have something better," Victoria said. "We have each other, we have community, and we have the truth about what kind of man he really is." Marcus reached over and took her hand. His fingers were warm despite the cold. "All right," he said simply. "Let's fight back." Standing there in the snow-softened darkness, their hands clasped in promise, Victoria felt the last ties to her old life dissolve. She wasn't the banker's daughter anymore. She was a ranch hand, a pie baker, a fighter for justice. She was home. The next morning brought clear skies and a transformed world. Snow blanketed everything in pristine white, hiding the scars and struggles beneath a layer of pure possibility. "It's beautiful," Charlie breathed, his nose pressed to the window. "It's work," Rosa corrected with a smile. "All that snow needs clearing if we're going to get anything done." But even she couldn't hide her appreciation for the scene. The ranch looked like something from a fairy tale, all clean lines and sparkling surfaces. Victoria was the first one out, shovel in hand. 6 weeks ago, the thought of manual snow removal would have been absurd. Now she attacked the task with the same determination she brought to every chore. "Save some for the rest of us," Marcus called, emerging with his own shovel. Soon the entire ranch crew was out, turning work into competition. Who could clear the most? Who could throw snow the farthest? Charlie's delighted shrieks as he pelted Jimmy with snowballs added to the festive atmosphere. "You've all lost your minds," Rosa declared, but she was laughing as she said it. It was Frank who brought them back to earth. "Riders coming," he announced, pointing to dark specks moving against the white landscape. Victoria's stomach clenched. Had her father sent men to drag her back? To punish the ranch for interfering with his plans? But as the riders drew closer, she recognized the lead figure, Mrs. Garrett herself, accompanied by what looked like half the valley's ranchers. "We came to say thank you," the widow said as they gathered in the yard, "and to hear more about this cooperative idea young Jimmy's been spreading around town." Victoria shot Jimmy a look. He shrugged, unrepentant. Seemed too good to keep secret. What followed was a council of war disguised as a social gathering. Ranchers crowded into Rosa's kitchen, sharing stories of predatory loans and impossible terms. Each had their own tale of Pemberton Bank's cruelty, their own brush with disaster. "We can't go on like this," declared Tom Morrison, whose ranch bordered the Garrett spread. "One by one, he's picking us off." "Together, we're stronger," Victoria said. "If we pool resources, share labor, create our own emergency fund." "With what money?" someone asked. "We're all stretched thin as it is." We start small, Marcus suggested. Maybe we can't replace the bank overnight, but we can create a safety net. Everyone contributes what they can, when they can. When someone's in trouble, the fund helps them out. Like barn raising, old Pete Hendricks mused. Community coming together. Exactly, Victoria agreed. My father wins because he isolates us, makes us think we're alone. But look around this room. We're not alone. The meeting went late into the night. By the time the last rancher left, they had the bones of a plan. Not perfect, not complete, but a beginning. You know he won't stand for this, Rosa warned as they cleaned up. Your father. He'll fight back. Then we'll be ready, Victoria said. But even as she spoke the brave words, she knew Rosa was right. Charles Pemberton didn't become the valley's most powerful man by allowing challenges to his authority. Whatever came next, it would test them all. For now, though, they had this moment, this victory, this proof that change was possible. Victoria stepped onto the porch for one last look at the snow-covered ranch. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles to fight. But tonight, she was exactly where she belonged. Marcus joined her, standing close enough that she could feel his warmth. No regrets? He asked. Victoria thought of silk dresses and servants, of champagne breakfasts and crystal chandeliers. Then she looked at her calloused hands, felt the satisfying ache of honest work in her muscles, remembered the joy on Widow Garrett's face. Not one, she said, and meant it. The storm had passed, but Victoria knew another was coming. Her father wouldn't let this stand. The battle for the valley's soul was just beginning. But as she stood there with Marcus, surrounded by the family she'd chosen and the community she'd joined, Victoria felt ready for whatever came next. She'd learned to work like them. Now she would learn to fight like them, too. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a nervous young man in a suit too fine for ranch country. Victoria recognized him as one of her father's clerks, though he avoided her eyes as he handed the envelope to Marcus. I'm to wait for a response, the clerk mumbled. Marcus read the letter, his jaw tightening with each line. Without a word, he passed it to Victoria. Notice of intent to foreclose, she read aloud. Due to violation of loan terms regarding unauthorized commercial activity on ranch property. Her hands trembled with fury. He's claiming our pie sales violated some obscure clause. Can he do that? Rosa asked. Victoria knew her father's methods too well. He'll have found some technicality. He always does. The clerk shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Pemberton said to tell you that this can all go away if Miss Victoria returns home where she belongs. Tell Mr. Pemberton, Victoria said, her voice steady despite her rage, that I am home. After the clerk left, they gathered around the kitchen table like generals planning a campaign. The notice gave them 30 days to pay the full loan amount or face seizure of the ranch. How much? Frank asked grimly. Marcus checked his ledgers. $12,000. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. It might as well have been $12 million for all the chance they had of raising it. We've been making payments, Diego protested. Never missed one. Doesn't matter, Victoria explained. These acceleration clauses let him call in the whole loan if we violate any terms. It's legal theft. Charlie, who'd been quietly drawing at the end of the table, pushed his paper toward Victoria. It showed stick figures holding hands around a house. We won't let him take our home, the boy said solemnly. Victoria hugged him close, fighting tears. How could she explain that sometimes the bad guys had all the power? That being right wasn't always enough? We fight, Marcus said simply, just like we planned, but bigger and faster than we thought. Over the following days, word spread through the valley like wildfire. The cooperative they'd been slowly building suddenly became urgent necessity. Ranchers who'd been hesitant now saw the writing on the wall. If Pemberton could destroy Cross Creek Ranch over pie sales, none of them were safe. The first gathering drew 20 families. The second, 30. By the end of the week, they were meeting in the old Grange Hall, long abandoned but still sound. We need a name, Tom Morrison suggested. Something that tells Pemberton we mean business. Valley Mutual Aid Society, old Pete offered. Montana Free Ranchers, another voice called. Victoria stood, commanding attention. Silver Ridge Community Trust, she said. Let him know we're taking back our town, starting with its name. The vote was unanimous. But naming themselves was the easy part. Raising $12,000 in 30 days seemed impossible until Widow Garrett stood up. I've got something to say, she began, voice trembling but determined. This ranch saved me when I had nothing. Now it's my turn. She pulled out a leather pouch. $600. It's all I've saved, but it's yours. We can't take your savings, Marcus protested. You're not taking, Mrs. Garrett corrected. I'm investing. In the only bank that ever gave a damn about people like us. One by one, others stood. Pete Hendricks offered $200. Tom Morrison, $350. Amounts that seemed small individually but grew with each contribution. Victoria watched through blurred vision as the community her father had tried to break instead united against him. But even as the pledges mounted, she knew it wouldn't be enough. They might raise $3,000, maybe $4,000, far short of what they needed. That night, she found Marcus in the barn, mending tack by lantern light. We're gonna lose everything, she said quietly. He looked up, those storm cloud eyes steady. Maybe, but we'll lose it fighting. I could go back, Victoria said, the words tasting like poison. End this before anyone else gets hurt. Marcus set down his work and crossed to her. You think that would end it? Your father's not attacking the ranch because of you. He's attacking because we dared to help someone he wanted to crush. Because we showed people they could fight back. But it's accelerating because of me, Victoria insisted. Good, Marcus said fiercely. Let him show his true colors. Let the whole valley see what kind of man he really is. He cupped her face in his calloused hands. You asked me once why I helped you. Truth is, I saw something in you that first morning. Not the banker's daughter, but the woman willing to leave everything behind rather than live a lie. Don't prove me wrong now. Victoria leaned into his touch. I'm scared, she admitted. So am I, Marcus said. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe alone. Their lips met in a kiss that tasted of promises and determination. When they finally broke apart, Victoria felt something fundamental shift. This wasn't just about saving the ranch anymore. It was about claiming the life she'd chosen, the love she'd found, the future she'd fight for. The next morning brought unexpected allies. Mary, Victoria's friend from Silver Ridge, arrived in a hired carriage, looking utterly out of place but grimly determined. Your father's lost his mind, Mary announced without preamble. The whole town's talking about how he's persecuting his own daughter. Even his business partners are getting nervous. Mary, you shouldn't be here, Victoria said, though she hugged her friend tightly. He'll make trouble for your family. Let him try, Mary said. My father's already moving our accounts to the bank in Billings. Others are doing the same. She pressed a velvet bag into Victoria's hands. $1,500. From the ladies' auxiliary. They said to tell you that your mother would be proud. Victoria nearly sobbed. Her mother's friends, society women who'd seemed to care only for fashion and gossip, were risking her father's wrath to help. There's more, Mary continued. I've been spreading word about your mother's recipes. The hotels in Billings, Helena, even as far as Denver, they all want to place orders. Big orders. We can't fill orders if we lose the ranch, Rosa pointed out. Then we'll fill them from somewhere else, Mary said firmly. This is bigger than one ranch now. This is about proving that Charles Pemberton doesn't own Montana. The days blurred together in a frenzy of activity. Victoria and Rosa baked until their arms ached, filling orders that seemed to double daily. Marcus and the hands worked their regular jobs plus extra shifts at neighboring ranches, every penny going to the fund. Charlie set up a stand at the gate, selling cups of cider to travelers, his earnest face earning more donations than the cider itself. But time was running out. With 1 week left, they'd raised barely half what they needed. Victoria could feel the noose tightening, her father's trap closing around them. Then Frank had an idea that changed everything. Auction, he said during one of their nightly planning sessions. Not the ranch, but everything else. Labor, goods, services, make it an event. Bring the whole valley together. Who's going to bid on ranch work? Diego asked skeptically. Everyone who's ever needed an extra hand, Frank explained. We auction future labor, 10 days of fence mending, 20 days of harvest. Help. Whatever people need, whenever they need it. And goods? Rosa asked, catching on. Everything we can spare, Victoria added. Tools, furniture, livestock we can manage without. Even my mother's journal, the original. Marcus looked at her sharply. You can't auction your mother's journal. It's just paper and ink, Victoria said, though her heart clenched at the thought. What matters is that the recipes are already out in the world, doing good. Mother would understand. The auction was set for Saturday, 3 days before the deadline. Word spread through telegraph and horseback, reaching every corner of the valley and beyond. That Friday night, Victoria couldn't sleep. She walked through the ranch, memorizing every board and beam. This might be her last night here. Despite everything they'd done, everything they'd built, it might not be enough. She found herself in the barn, running her hands along Buttercup's soft nose. The mare nickered softly, as if sensing her distress. We tried, girl, Victoria whispered. We really tried. Not done trying yet, Marcus's voice came from behind her. She turned to find him standing in the moonlight, streaming through the barn door. What if no one comes? What if they come but don't bid enough? Then we'll know we did everything we could, Marcus said. That has to be enough. Is it enough for you? Victoria asked. Losing your home, your brother's legacy, because of me? Marcus crossed to her in 2 strides, pulling her against him. This ranch is just land and buildings. Home is wherever you are. Win or lose tomorrow, that won't change. They stood together in the quiet barn, holding each other as if they could stop time through sheer will. Morning came too soon, bringing clouds that threatened rain. Victoria dressed in her work clothes, the same borrowed outfit she'd worn that first day. It seemed fitting, somehow. She'd arrived with nothing, and she might leave the same way. But when she stepped outside, she gasped. The road leading to the ranch was full of wagons, carriages, and riders. People streamed onto the property, setting up tables, unfurling banners, creating a fairground atmosphere. What's happening? She asked Rosa, who was watching from the porch with equal amazement. Community, Rosa said simply. Look. Each wagon brought donations for the auction. Handmade quilts, preserved goods, furniture, tools. The Morrison family had brought a yearling colt. The Hendricks contributed a plow. Even people Victoria didn't recognize were adding to the growing collection. We can't possibly auction all this, Victoria said, overwhelmed. Sure we can, Jimmy said, appearing with a makeshift auctioneer's podium. Got us a real auctioneer coming from Billings. Heard about what we're doing and offered to work for free. By noon, the ranch looked like a festival. Musicians played from the porch. Children ran between the tables. The smell of grilled meat and baked goods filled the air. It was as if the entire valley had decided to throw a party in the face of disaster. The auctioneer, a thin man with a voice like thunder, called the crowd to order. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here for a purpose. The Cross Creek Ranch has been good to this valley, and now the valley's going to be good right back. The bidding started slowly, then picked up steam. $20 for a quilt. $50 for a weekend of fence mending. $100 for the yearling colt. But the real surprise came when they auctioned labor. Ranchers bid against each other for Marcus's expertise with horses. Rosa's cooking skills sparked a bidding war between the 2 hotels in town. Even Charlie's chicken feeding services earned $20 from a neighbor who declared the boy had a magic touch with poultry. Then came the moment Victoria had dreaded. Her mother's journal was brought forward, its leather binding worn smooth by years of use. Here's a piece of history, the auctioneer announced. Elizabeth Pemberton's own recipe collection, in her own hand. We'll start the bidding at $5,000, a voice called from the back of the crowd. Everyone turned to stare. A woman in an elegant traveling suit stood beside an expensive carriage, her bearing regal despite the dust of the road. Victoria's heart stopped. She knew that face from old photographs. Amelia Thornton, her mother's sister, who'd moved to San Francisco years ago and never returned. Aunt Amelia? Victoria whispered. The woman smiled. Hello, dear one. I heard you were fighting the good fight. Thought it was time I came home. 5,000, the auctioneer repeated, clearly stunned. Do I hear 5,001? 6, "1,000," another voice called. This time it was a man Victoria recognized as a railroad executive from Helena. "7," Aunt Amelia countered calmly. "$10,000," a new voice interrupted. Charles Pemberton himself stepped through the crowd, his face cold as winter granite. "For my wife's property, stolen by an ungrateful daughter." The crowd fell silent. Victoria felt every eye on her as her father approached the podium. "This farce ends now," he declared. "I'll buy the journal and forgive the ranch's debt. All Victoria has to do is come home where she belongs." The silence stretched taut as a bowstring. Victoria looked at Marcus, at Rosa and Charlie, at all the faces turned toward her with hope and fear mingled in their eyes. She stepped forward. "That journal isn't yours to buy," she said, voice carrying clear across the crowd. "It's not mine either. It belongs to this community, to everyone who's tasted my mother's kindness in every pie, every cake, every meal made with love instead of greed." She turned to face the crowd. "My father thinks everything has a price, but some things can't be bought. Like friendship, like community, like the choice to stand with people who judge you by your work, not your name." "Fine words," her father sneered. "But words don't pay debts. When I take this ranch—" "You won't be taking anything," Aunt Amelia interrupted. "$15,000 for the journal. And I'll be donating it right back to the Silver Ridge Community Trust, to be shared freely as my sister would have wanted." The auctioneer's hammer fell before Charles Pemberton could respond. The crowd erupted in cheers that shook the very ground. But Victoria's father wasn't finished. "This changes nothing. You think one auction saves you? I own half this valley." "Actually," Mary stepped forward, flanked by several well-dressed men and women, "you might want to review your recent statements. There's been a run on the bank. Seems people don't trust a man who'd destroy his own daughter." Charles Pemberton's face went white. "You're bluffing." One of the men, whom Victoria recognized as a prominent merchant, shook his head. "Check your telegrams, Pemberton. Your bank is facing a crisis. You might want to handle that before you worry about one ranch's debt." For the first time in Victoria's memory, her father looked uncertain. He turned to her, and for just a moment she saw something almost human in his eyes. "Your mother would be ashamed," he said quietly. "My mother would be here, bidding alongside everyone else," Victoria replied. "It's you she'd be ashamed of. You forgot what she tried to teach us. That wealth means nothing without compassion." Charles Pemberton left without another word, his empire crumbling with each step. Victoria knew she'd likely never see him again, and found she felt nothing but pity for a man who'd chosen gold over grace. The auction continued, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. By sunset, they'd raised over $20,000. Enough to pay the debt, establish the community trust, and ensure that no family in the valley would face foreclosure alone again. As the crowd finally dispersed, Victoria found herself on the porch with her chosen family. Marcus's arm around her shoulders, Rosa and Charlie beside them, Frank and the hands arrayed like guardians. "So," Aunt Amelia said, approaching with a smile that reminded Victoria painfully of her mother, "I hear there's room at this inn for one more." "Always room for family," Rosa said warmly. As stars began to pepper the darkening sky, Victoria reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She'd fled with nothing but fear and desperation. She'd been challenged to work like them, to prove herself worthy of shelter and community. But somewhere along the way, she'd discovered something her father never understood. Working like them wasn't about the labor itself. It was about working with them, for them, beside them. It was about choosing connection over isolation, purpose over privilege, love over law. "What are you thinking?" Marcus asked softly. Victoria smiled, remembering that first morning when he'd said those fateful words. "I'm thinking that I can work like them. Because I am them. And they are me. We're all just people trying to build something good together." Charlie tugged on her sleeve. "Miss Victoria, now that you're staying forever, can I call you Aunt Victoria?" "I'd like that very much," she said, ruffling his hair. "And Marcus can be uncle." "Marcus!" Charlie added with 6-year-old logic. Victoria and Marcus exchanged glances over the boy's head, a whole conversation in a single look. "Maybe someday," Marcus said, his eyes never leaving Victoria's, "if your Aunt Victoria will have me." "Is that a proposal, Mr. Sullivan?" Victoria asked, heart racing. "It's a promise," he replied. "However long it takes, whatever comes next, we face it together." As if in agreement, the evening breeze carried the scent of apple blossoms from the orchards, mixing with the lingering aroma of the day's festivities. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The community trust needed organizing. The ranch needed running. Orders for her mother's recipes needed filling. But tonight, surrounded by the family she'd chosen and the community she'd helped save, Victoria knew she was exactly where she belonged. She'd fled with nothing and found everything. She'd been challenged to work like them and discovered that them included her. The banker's daughter was gone. In her place stood Victoria Sullivan to be, ranch hand, pie baker, community organizer, and living proof that sometimes the greatest wealth couldn't be counted in dollars. As Marcus had said that first day, everyone deserved a second chance. Victoria had taken hers and turned it into something beautiful, something worth fighting for, something worth keeping. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to human struggles, but in the warm light spilling from the ranch house windows, Victoria saw a different truth. They'd won more than a legal battle. They'd proven that love, community, and courage could stand against any force that sought to divide them. And that was worth more than all the banks in Montana. Spring arrived in the valley like a benediction, painting the hills with wild flowers and filling the air with promise. 6 months had passed since the auction that saved Cross Creek Ranch, and the changes were visible everywhere Victoria looked. The Silver Ridge Community Trust had grown from desperate idea to thriving reality. The old Grange Hall now housed their offices, where volunteers helped neighbors navigate finances, plan crops, and weather whatever storms life brought. Victoria spent 3 days a week there, teaching financial literacy, with the knowledge her father had never intended her to use for good. But today was special. Today was her wedding day. "Hold still," Rosa chided, adjusting the simple lace veil that had belonged to her own mother. "You're fidgeting worse than Charlie on Christmas morning." Victoria forced herself to breathe slowly, looking at her reflection in the cracked mirror of the ranch house bedroom. The woman staring back bore little resemblance to the pampered girl who'd fled Silver Ridge all those months ago. Sun had bronzed her skin, work had strengthened her body. Purpose had brightened her eyes. "You look beautiful," Aunt Amelia said from the doorway. In the months since the auction, she'd become a fixture at the ranch, her San Francisco sophistication tempered by genuine warmth and terrible jokes that made Charlie giggle uncontrollably. "I look nervous," Victoria corrected. "Same thing on a wedding day," Amelia assured her. "Your mother was so nervous she forgot her own name during the vows. Called herself Eleanor instead of Elizabeth." "Your father?" "Well," he laughed, and that's when she knew she'd chosen right. Victoria felt tears threaten. "I wish she could be here." "She is," Rosa said softly. "In every pie cooling in the kitchen, every flower blooming in the garden, every person gathered here because of what you built from her memory." Through the window, Victoria could see the ranch transformed. Tables stretched beneath the old oak tree. Wildflower bouquets adorned every surface. What seemed like half the valley had arrived, turning the simple ceremony into a community celebration. "The Reverend's ready," Charlie announced, bursting through the door in his Sunday best, though grass stains already marked his knees. "And Uncle Marcus looks like he might faint." "He's nervous too?" Victoria asked, oddly comforted. Charlie nodded solemnly. "Frank gave him whiskey, but his hands are still shaking." The women laughed, the tension breaking like sun through clouds. Victoria stood, smoothing the simple blue dress she'd chosen over white silk. It had been her mother's, altered by Rosa's clever fingers to fit perfectly. "Ready?" Amelia asked, offering her arm. In the absence of her father, her aunt would walk her down the makeshift aisle. Victoria took one last look around the room that had been her sanctuary. Ready. The path from house to oak tree had never seemed longer. Victoria was aware of every face turning toward her, every smile and tear. These people had become her world. Mrs. Garrett dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. Tom Morrison tipped his hat. Even Frank, gruff Frank who doubted her longest, wore a suspiciously soft expression. But Victoria had eyes only for the man waiting beneath the oak tree. Marcus stood straight and tall in his one good suit. The storm-cloud eyes that had first challenged her now filled with a love that took her breath away. "You came," he whispered when she reached him, as if he doubted even now. "Nowhere else I'd rather be," she whispered back. Reverend Thomas cleared his throat, his own eyes suspiciously moist. "Dearly beloved, we gather today to witness something special, not just a union of two people, but a celebration of what's possible when we choose love over fear, community over isolation, hope over despair." The ceremony was simple. No elaborate speeches or grand gestures. Just two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely circumstances, making promises in front of those who'd watched their love grow. "Victoria," Marcus said when it came time for vows, "you crashed into my life like a thunderstorm, disrupting everything I thought I knew. You challenged me to see beyond my own grief, to believe in second chances not just for others but for myself. You work harder than any three people I know, laugh louder than propriety suggests, and love deeper than I thought possible. I promise to stand beside you through whatever comes, to support your dreams even when they scare me, and to never stop being amazed by the woman who fled with nothing and built everything." Victoria had to swallow twice before she could speak. "Marcus, you told me once that everyone deserves a second chance. But you gave me more than that. You gave me a first chance at a real life, one built on truth and work and purpose. You saw potential in a spoiled girl who couldn't even hold a pitchfork properly. You taught me that strength isn't about never falling, but about always getting back up, preferably with help from those who love us. I promise to work beside you, dream beside you, and face whatever storms come our way together. Because home isn't a place. It's wherever you are." "The rings?" Reverend Thomas prompted. Charlie stepped forward importantly, producing two simple gold bands from his pocket. They'd been fashioned from Victoria's mother's wedding ring and a piece of Marcus's rodeo prize buckle, melted down and reformed into something new, yet honoring what came before. As Marcus slipped the ring onto her finger, Victoria felt the weight of it like an anchor, grounding her to this moment, this place, these people. "By the power vested in me, by the state of Montana and the grace of God," Reverend Thomas proclaimed, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Marcus, you may kiss your bride." Their lips met to cheers that echoed across the valley. For a moment, the world contained only them. Two souls who'd traveled hard roads to find each other. Then Charlie tugged on Victoria's dress. "Does this mean I can call you Aunt Victoria for real now?" "Yes," she laughed, scooping him into a hug. "For real and forever." The celebration that followed would be talked about for years. Tables groaned under the weight of food contributed by every family. Musicians played until their fingers ached. Children ran wild through the orchards, while adults danced on ground packed smooth by generations of footsteps. "No regrets?" Mary asked, finding Victoria during a quiet moment. She'd arrived from Billings, where she now lived with her husband, a doctor who treated patients regardless of their ability to pay. "None," Victoria assured her. "You?" "Only that it took us so long to see what really mattered," Mary replied. "Your father, by the way, he's gone east. Sold what was left of the bank and disappeared. Some say he's in New York, trying to start over." Victoria felt a pang of something that might have been sadness. "I hope he finds peace." "You're more generous than he deserved," Mary observed. "Maybe. But holding on to anger would only poison what we've built here. He made his choices. I've made mine." As evening painted the sky in shades of rose and gold, Marcus found Victoria standing at the garden gate, looking out over the ranch. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Sullivan?" She leaned into him, marveling at the ranch was stable, even profitable. The garden produced enough to share with neighbors who struggled. "We could expand," Victoria suggested. "Not just pies, but preserves." dried goods, maybe even a small store where people could buy local products at fair prices. Competing with your father's old associates? Offering an alternative, she corrected, same as the trust. People should have choices. A knock interrupted their planning. Charlie burst in without waiting for permission, his face bright with excitement. Aunt Victoria, Uncle Marcus, come quick, Hope is walking. Really walking, not just wobbling. They followed the boy to the barn, where indeed the little foal was taking determined steps around her stall, Buttercup watching with maternal pride. She's strong, Frank observed, joining them at the rail. Good bloodlines. She'll make a fine horse someday. For Charlie, Victoria decided impulsively, when they're both old enough, a boy should have a horse to grow up with. Charlie's eyes went impossibly wide. Really? My own horse? Your own horse, Marcus confirmed. But that means responsibility. Feeding, grooming, training. You up for that? Yes, yes, I'll be the best horse owner ever. Charlie danced in place, unable to contain his joy. Watching him, Victoria felt a deep contentment settle in her chest. This was wealth, not numbers in a ledger or gold in a vault, but a child's joy, a community's trust, a husband's love. What are you smiling about? Rosa asked, appearing with her morning basket of eggs. Everything, Victoria answered. Absolutely everything. The day unfolded like so many before it, yet different, because now Victoria moved through it as a married woman, a full partner in the ranch's future. She worked beside Marcus repairing the fence line, their comfortable rhythm born of months working together. She helped Rosa plan the week's meals, factoring in the pie orders that seemed to grow daily. She listened as Frank outlined his ideas for improving the barn, his grudging respect having transformed into genuine partnership. At noon, riders appeared on the horizon. Victoria shaded her eyes, recognizing several members of the Community Trust Board. They dismounted with serious expressions that made her stomach tighten. Trouble? Marcus asked, joining them on the porch. Opportunity, Tom Morrison corrected. But we need to decide fast. The old Pemberton bank building is up for sale. The estate lawyers want it gone quick and quiet. Victoria's breath caught. Her father's fortress, the symbol of everything she'd run from, now standing empty and available. We could never afford it, she said. Actually, Mrs. Garrett said with a sly smile, we've been saving. Every family that's benefited from the trust has been setting aside what they can. It's not enough to buy it outright, but with the right terms. You want to put the community trust in my father's bank? Victoria couldn't hide her shock. We want to transform it, Pete Hendricks explained. Turn a symbol of greed into one of hope. Seems fitting, doesn't it? Your mother's recipes bringing life back to the place your father used to deal death to dreams. Victoria looked at Marcus, seeing her own wild hope reflected in his eyes. It's poetic justice, he said. But more than that, it's practical. Central location, good bones, plenty of space for offices and meeting rooms. And a kitchen, Rosa added. A proper commercial kitchen for the pie business. Think what we could do with real equipment. They spent the afternoon huddled around the kitchen table, working figures, making plans. By evening, they had a proposal. Not perfect, but possible. The trust would buy the building, with payments managed by the very families who'd once feared its foreclosure notices. I'll need to go to town, Victoria said. See the lawyers. Make the offer. We'll go, Marcus corrected. Partners, remember? That night, as they prepared for the journey, Victoria pulled out her mother's journal. She'd thought about selling it during the auction, but couldn't bear to let it go. Now she was glad. Inside the front cover, her mother had written, "True wealth is measured in the lives we touch and the love we leave behind." She would have loved this, Victoria said, showing Marcus the inscription. Turning father's monument to greed into something that serves others. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.